Okay. And I hate to steal the floor, but I'll put it like this: in the case of the adult and the child, it's a moral responsibility for the adult to stop the action, right? To end that encounter. And that's how I feel about the human and the animal. When you come to the 11-year-old concept, neither one has the tools to know whether to stop the action or not. They simply don't have the moral identity yet. So is the action necessarily wrong? If an adult were to walk in on that, it would be the responsibility of that adult to end that encounter. But
or to let it go, if that were your.
okay, but fair enough. From my own societal standpoint, my own moral standpoint, I think that particular action is wrong. But fair enough, an argument could be given that, yeah, an adult could then decide whether to end the encounter or not. But the children can't be expected to make that decision on their own. They don't have the cognitive capability yet to be able to do that. Your point on like where does that cognitive capability kick in? We don't know. Nobody knows. No, not even the person who's coming into cognitive awareness knows. So we have to arbitrarily set some kind of time limit so that we can at least legally judge it. So that we can. When it comes to that sort of thing, everything is judged externally, right? If it was us building our own moral law, we wouldn't need laws. There wouldn't have to be something written down. We could just guide ourselves. But because we place judgment on others, moral judgments on others, we have to have something that acts as a rule for us to work with, so that it's applied equally and fairly and all of that kind of fun stuff. So yeah, I think that the problem with the two kids isn't a consent problem at that point. It's a lack of understanding problem. They consent in the sense that both of them are equally interested in the act, but they're not cognitively aware enough to know that what they're doing has some kind of emotional long-term consequence.
Well,
Matthew, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, I'm just still curious on like what you mean by they're not morally adult or mature yet. Just because I feel like that's very vague, and I'm not really sure how to grasp that. What if this 11-year-old had already had extensive sex ed and is reading like Donna Haraway, and like you don't know, like what if that were to happen? Is the 11-year-old still not okay?
So let's assume that one of the kids is much more cognitively aware than the other, or that both of them are highly cognitively aware. Can we imply that those two children now exemplify all of 11, or even a small minority of that 11? So what we're doing is we're kind of throwing this game changer in there, and that's fine because then we can imply that the cognitive awareness has happened, right? At that point, it becomes the responsibility of the person to either stop or continue the action based on their cognitive awareness.
Yeah, I just think that when you say stop the action, that implies that that humanity has a norm that everyone must adhere to, and I'm still not in agreement with that. Just because, with your example of, if some people went into porn and started engaging in sex, it's our moral obligation to stop that. Well, I feel like that just implies that everyone has this norm that, open sex acts are not okay, or I don't know, maybe that's not the right way to say it, but I feel like there are people who do find themselves outside of that norm, and I don't know, we're almost imposing that they adhere to that.
Absolutely. We impose right now on others that they're not allowed to kill other people.
All right, but before this goes back and forth for too long.
Yeah, okay, so
Just right.
I'm going to say that talking about killing and talking about sexual acts are two different things, and we're getting caught up in conflating different things pretty problematically here. What I think might help us think more clearly through this is to go back to Foucault and talk about power and trace a genealogy of bestiality, trace a genealogy of pedophilia, and see what institutions, what discourses were put into place, arose to constitute these moral identities that socially we feel we need to so strictly adhere to. So, it is non-normative to want to have sex with animals. And we can think of all sorts of arguments for why that is legitimate, but it might be more helpful to trace how we've gotten to this point where it is non-normative. Because historically, I can't say for sure, but perhaps that wasn't true. Perhaps it wasn't true that for, when the expectation of a human life was to only live 40 years, well, maybe having sex with an 11-year-old as a fully mature man, 11-year-old girl, was not problematic because that was sort of the nature of the life cycle. So it's not as simple as saying it's right or it's wrong. It's so much more complicated than that, and we need to constantly remind ourselves of that, or else we end up in this situation where it's like, well, you're right, you're wrong, and if you are wrong, then you support pedophilia, bestiality, and murder, and the logical extensions of that.
Okay, I apologize, however, I have to go set up for lunch, which starts in 10 minutes or 15 minutes. So, you want to take over something?
So you're gonna leave it.
Yeah, sorry,
Figure it out.
sorry. I'm gonna get absentee.
And then I have a question back there too. And now you have to move down, so I can see
Do you think that we put too much emphasis on sex in our culture and in this dialogue, and that we're talking about sex is this thing where you need to be morally able to understand the full emotional and psychological repercussions, and that maybe sex should have, less stress, less import in terms of its full range of consequences. And think about it for humans, but for non-humans also, two animals having sex with each other, are we gonna stop it because if you say that if we're going to say animals can't have this cognitive ability to understand the repercussions of the act, then should they not have sex? Do we really need to?
We actually do that now, I mean, we prevent animals from breeding all the time,
Yeah.
right?
But not for that
But
reason.
not for that reason, though.
Not
Do you think there's
Well, but they don't
overpopulation?
know, they don't care about the outcome, that there's going to be another foal on the ground or litter of whatever, right?
But I think that, so if we can maybe think that that's problematic too, though, but I'm just saying the reason why
But
we don't
it's
stop.
still not an issue of consent anyway.
Yeah, we're not stopping animals from having sex with each other because we think they don't understand the emotional repercussions of the act of sex.
Well, I go back to what I said earlier, I still
Yeah,
think
you're
it's a
right.
wrong argument.
Yeah, no, I need to.
What did you say, sorry?
I just think that consent is the wrong argument we have.
Yeah.
I think there are other platforms that we can talk about. Sexual identity, is it a valid sexual identity? Should we be legislating sexual identity? I mean, there are lots of other planes on which we could discuss whether bestiality, if you want to consider that the act, whether we think that that's an okay thing or not in our society. I tend to fall into John's camp in saying that we have to have some guidelines. We have to be able to put a box around some things, otherwise we have complete chaos. What
Who makes those guidelines?
And what's
we
the
do,
power
we
and
collectively decide.
Yeah,
But
but
what
who
if-
are we? Who's in
Yeah,
power?
if I'm saying that bestiality can be consensual, then I didn't make that law.
who's this we that has happened? Is it governments? Is it states? Is it
Well, I think
society?
it's
Is it-
historical. I mean,
But for how long was homosexuality illegal?
Yeah. Maybe shouldn't we be questioning
but those are
how
two
these norms
humans
got
who
made?
have the ability to speak to one another and
Yeah.
communicate with each other.
But it's evidence of changing norms.
Yeah.
But if you follow the train of that thought, then this comes up all the time. If we allow gays to marry, then it's just a skitch around the corner before we allow people to marry their dog. And I think it's the wrong dialogue to be having.
Are you saying, sorry, I was confused at what your last point was. Are you saying that once we start having these conversations and trying to seek policy change, are you saying that it becomes a slippery slope?
Yes, I do
Okay.
think it's a slippery slope.
I mean, I don't know, personally, I think that's why we're here talking about these issues, and we still have these rules against necrophilia, incest, the like, but we're putting time into examining them just to see if they are still of the same values. I don't know, but I think your point is really good about sex and, are we lionizing sex in society, because it also, throughout my study,